In terms of the injuries, you mentioned them a couple of times already, Dan. Obviously, you bring in Desartes, as you mentioned, to get some help back there, really. But I had a quick check before we spoke, and there's still a few big hitters on that injury list by the looks of it. I think Matty Cash, Onana, Kamara's a recent addition to that, Concert and Pau Torres. So it's not quite a clean bill of health just yet.
No, I mean, Emery hasn't done his press conference ahead of the game yet, but I doubt any of those players that you've just mentioned will be back. So the players you've just mentioned, you've got your number one right back injured, your first choice centre-half pairing injured, and then now your best defensive midfielder, who I can't say enough how good he is, Boubacar Kamara. So defensively, there's obviously going to be problems. And when you've got those problems, Liverpool aren't really the opposition that you want to be coming up against with the embarrassment of riches that you guys have up front. Any combination can cause teams problems. So it's going to be really hard at Villa Park on Wednesday. The injuries at the moment, just in the central midfield area as well, Villa have only got two central midfield players, John McGinn, who hasn't played there much over the last few years, and Yuri Tillemans, who's played every game this season and he's probably going to need a break at some point. So there is a lot of injuries going into the game that is going to affect Villa. My hope is that, we've still got a good squad. We've got new players who've just come in, I'm sure one of which we're going to talk about very shortly. It'll be a really good atmosphere. And Liverpool, I think you've not stumbled because obviously you're having a brilliant season, but this is probably the first time since Slot's arrived that there's a little bit of tetchiness around the club, a few questions being asked. Obviously, it's to a very tiny extent, but it feels like this is the kind of moment where you see what Liverpool are about. Can they ride a difficult moment?
No, absolutely it is, yeah. And tetchy was the word on Sunday for the final 20 minutes against Wolves, let me tell you now. Yeah, tetchy, anxious, nervy, all of the above, really. It was, not pretty. But we got over the line in a fashion. It was ugly.
That's a big thing as well.
Of course,
if you don't play well and you still win, that's as good as demolishing someone and playing your best football, in my opinion.
No, absolutely it is. Yeah, champions win games, don't they, ultimately, by hook or by crook, and it definitely felt like that. But you are right at the same time, because, I mentioned the Plymouth game earlier on. Obviously, there was a sickening lazy equaliser in the derby, and then just getting over the line against Wolves. Doesn't feel like we're enjoying our greatest moment with you guys, obviously, on Wednesday night, and then City and then Newcastle. That we have to book that trend, because that's a real test, you know what I mean, as a proper examination. So let's see. In terms of the key players, in terms of sort of the standout squad members for you guys, I wrote Ollie Watkins down because kind of obviously, but I'm sure there's more to it than that.
Yeah, look, Watkins is having an off season if you speak to some Villa fans, but he still scored 11 goals in 25 starts in the Premier League. So for an off season, it's not too bad. And for me, I wouldn't change him for anyone. He just gives the team so much, and he's had some good days against Liverpool in the last few years as well. He's kind of been a little bit of a bogey player in some games for Liverpool. So he's still the main man, and I think John Duran going will do Ollie Watkins a massive favour, because he thrives when he knows he's the man who's going to get picked everywhere, the man that's got the shirt. So I'd expect him to have a better kind of second half or end to the season. The new boys are quite a big focus of conversation amongst Villa fans at the moment. Rashford and Asensio have both come on in the last two games, and both have looked really, really good, considering they're not really match fit. They've come on and impacted both games, and probably ended the games as Villa's two best players. I don't know whether you saw the Spurs FA Cup game, but the first 10, 15 minutes they were on the pitch was a really fun 10, 15 minutes. Rashford and Asensio looked so lively. The flicks, the tricks, the Olays came out. That was a really, really enjoyable game. And Rashford had a real impact on that game on Saturday against Ipswich when he came on. And, as fate would have it, I think he'll probably make his first start against you boys on Wednesday. And we know he's got a great record against you.
Yeah, that's all I need to hear. That's all I need to hear. Marcus Rashford against Trent Alexander-Arnold. There was a period in time, actually, when we used to do everything we possibly could to avoid that matchup. Trent was younger then, don't get me wrong. Yeah. He was nowhere near as experienced as he is now. And I think actually defensively, he's come on leaps and bounds this season alone under Arne Slot. However, we used to just play Joe Gomez at right back every time we went to Old Trafford in particular. It was never Trent against Rashford. But I think you're right. I think we might well see it on Wednesday night, whether it be for 60, 90 or 30 minutes. In terms of Wednesday night, in terms of the atmosphere at Villa Park, one of my favourite stadiums to go to. I'm going tomorrow night as well. Absolutely love it down there. Proper football stadium, proper football fans as well. This, I guess, sort of thus far this season has been absolutely fever pitch in there, certainly when Bayern Munich came to town, but this feels like another big occasion down there.
Yeah, I think sometimes the atmosphere gets away from Villa fans a little bit, like on Saturday, for example. And I think it's a case of they're so up for the big games, the Champions League games. It's almost like you get used to that and you forget that actually you've got the bread and butter of the league, and it's never going to be the same atmosphere in those kind of games as it is in the Champions League games. I would expect Wednesday to be a little bit more like the Champions League games. It's a huge game for Villa. I wouldn't call it must win, but a win really could kind of kickstart our season. And Liverpool, a huge club, having a brilliant season. The job that Slot's done, he's made it look so easy coming in for Jurgen Klopp, made it look way easier than it should be. It's going to be a really good game because both teams will try and play football. Both teams don't really have another way of playing. So I think it'll be a game with plenty of goals. And I'm obviously wary of Liverpool. I know what Liverpool can do, but I do look at it and think that there's ways that we can hurt you. But equally, I think there's plenty of ways that you can hurt us as well.
No, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah, and you just touched on it there, really, in terms of the approach from Emery. That was going to be my next question, because I think Unai Emery is one of the best coaches in the Premier League, actually, for what it's worth. And I think what makes him that, obviously his track record and his pedigree, as you mentioned earlier on, is one thing. But it's his ability to adapt and to sort of change his approach to certain teams in certain circumstances, certain games. And not a lot of managers, not all managers in the Premier League have that. I'm just Postecoglou. But for Unai Emery, how do you think he goes about this? Because obviously you're at home, there's certain expectations that come with being Aston Villa at home. It is Liverpool coming to town. Maybe not an all-conquering Liverpool like we've looked at times this season. From sort of what's gone before with big teams, in inverted commas, the top four, if you like, coming to Villa Park, how do you expect Emery to approach this one?
There's always just tweaks. On the face of it, the formation and the system is the same. But game to game, Emery always does something different. I think he'll line up with Rashford on that left-hand side. And it was interesting on Saturday because Villa have always played the left-hand side player is usually a number 10. So then players a left 10 and the wing back will come on and create the width on that side. In the second half, he brought Ian Maatsen on and Rashford on. And Rashford was the one who was very, very wide, and Maatsen tended to invert a little bit and make underlapping runs. So that was a bit of a change from what we've seen previously. Morgan Rogers has been brilliant as a central number 10 this season. It's a new role for him. He hadn't played that role for Villa before, and he's been one of the breakout players across the whole league, probably in Europe actually as well, when you look at what he's done in the Champions League. My thinking is that they'll try and utilise the pace and power of Rashford and Rogers drifting a little bit more towards that left-hand side and try and get in that channel between Trent and whoever's playing as right centre-back. I think Villa will look at that as being an avenue where they can get at Liverpool and they can hurt them, because Liverpool are obviously such a strong team, but Villa are very good in transition, and it will be in transition that Villa will get joy, I would say. But, it relies on the players to follow the instructions and take advantage of the gaps if they're there. If the gaps aren't there, Villa sometimes can get caught playing this kind of slow game that looks a bit ponderous and looks a bit tedious if they can't find the gap. So I think Liverpool's kind of off-the-ball setup would dictate what Villa can do.